July 2 edition of PFT PM. Sorry, I missed Monday. It was unavoidable today. Not unavoidable today. Here. Probably tomorrow as well. Won't do July 4th, maybe July 5th, depending upon how hungover I am, based upon the July 4th festivities. Got to celebrate our independence by consuming excessive amounts of alcohol, eating excessive amounts of food, and letting off excessive amounts of fireworks. Please be careful. Please be careful. Don't blow off any fingers. Don't get yourself injured. Don't get yourself killed. We need you out there consuming our content. And we also care about you individually. But yes, at the same time, we want you to still continue to consume all PFT offerings. And it's kind of hard to do that if you are dead. Okay, let's get started. On that happy note, I saw yesterday, CeeDee Lamb, Cowboys receiver, no plans to show up for Cowboys training camp unless and until he gets his new contract. Remember, he is entering year 5 of his rookie deal, the option year that is available to players taken in round 1. And CeeDee Lamb had a great year in his 4th season, applying even more pressure on the Cowboys to get this gentleman paid. And as the market has surpassed $30 million per year for receivers, and it never really was $30 million. More on that coming up, but it was never $30 million. It's now $35 million per year in new money, with others north of $30 million, like Eagles receiver A.J. Brown. Lamb had a big year last year. Lamb wants to cash in. Here's the problem. The Cowboys still haven't figured out the Dak Prescott contract, and that's $55.4 million in cap charge this year, $54.5 million in dead cap money next year. If his current contract voids, he has leverage that he has yet to show any inclination to surrender to the Cowboys. So the Cowboys wait and wait and wait and wait. And as I've said time and again throughout this offseason, when it comes to figuring out how to properly pay their young star players, the Cowboys are cheap, short-sighted, and not as smart as they think they are. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in this current conundrum with Dak Prescott, who has them over a barrel, even in a more precarious state than they were 3 years ago when they did his current contract. They have CeeDee Lamb entering year 5 with no long-term deal. And they have Micah Parsons, whose window is open after 3 years. And I frankly think he shouldn't show up for training camp without a new contract. He should do the Ezekiel Elliott. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Camp opens and he's in Mexico or wherever Zeke was that year, training and waiting for his new deal. So look, the Cowboys are just hoping they can hold this all together. CeeDee Lamb's position makes it clear that it's going to hit the fan. And they're going to have to do something. They got to get Dak done first. Then they got to get CeeDee done. Then they got to get Micah done. Now, Micah Parsons has said he's willing to wait his turn. I think that's a mistake. He plays a position that is more conducive to injury, serious injury, the kind of injury that can either end your career or even worse from the standpoint of getting paid or cashing in on your disability policy if you have one, and clearly he should. There's that middle ground of, my career isn't over, but I'm not the guy I used to be, so I'm not going to cash in my policy, and I'm not going to cash in on my contract. I'm just kind of a guy that's hanging around, limited by a serious injury that I'm having trouble recovering from. Look no farther than the guy that the Cowboys drafted, what's it been, 7-8 years ago? Jalen Smith, the linebacker, whose career was limited, not ended, but severely limited by an ACL tear that he suffered in a meaningless bowl game with Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame, Ohio State Fiesta Bowl, right? I think I remember that accurately. There's a chance I do. There's a chance I don't. There's a good chance CeeDee Lamb won't show up. And frankly, Micah Parsons shouldn't show up. And none of it matters until they can work out a deal with Dak Prescott. So this bungling by the Cowboys of 3 key contracts is coming into clearer and clearer focus the closer we get to the start of training camp. And it's not that they're just haphazardly cheap or gratuitously cheap. They gave Tony Pollard the 1-year franchise tag salary last year when they shouldn't have, $10 million. Remember, there was that moment where it's like, hey, this guy better sign it because they're going to wake up one day and realize no one else is going to pay $10 million to Tony Pollard to come off a broken ankle. And Pollard rushed to sign it, coincidentally, not as a result of our advice, but I heard from his camp, it was like, do you have our phones hacked? Well, no. And if I was going to hack phones, I would aim, for higher in the league's power structure. No offense to Tony Pollard's camp. Secondly, Michael Gallup, remember the contract they gave him? That was a debacle. That was a disaster. They ended up cutting him. So they pay the wrong guys, and they don't take care of the right guys. Prescott, Lamb, Parsons, they got a problem. And it's going to be a bigger and bigger deal the closer we get to the start of training camp. And it could explode if Lamb and Parsons don't show up for the start of training camp. That is going to be something to behold. In Miami, we've been talking about the possibility Tua Tagovailoa won't show up for the start of training camp. That may be the only way he gets what he wants. Remember, he has to choose between what he has and what he can get. Door number 3, what he wants, the only way to get that may be to not show up for training camp. There's no reason to think Tyreek Hill won't show up for training camp yet. He's taking a very serenity now, happy thoughts approach to his contract situation. We've reported, and it's basically been confirmed through the mouth of his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, they've been trying to get a new contract for Tyreek Hill for months. He got the new deal when he was traded by the Chiefs to the Dolphins a couple of years ago. And that deal has that fugazi, phony baloney back-end $45 million payment that drives the new money average from $25 million to $30 million. And when Hill talked about his situation recently, and again, it was all positive, I'm excited to see where I fit in the receiver contract structure. It just kind of implies and presumes that he's going to be given a new contract. There's no guarantee he's getting a new deal. And he mentioned the $30 million number. So either he's all in with the lie or he's been lied to, because it's not 30 million. It's never been 30 million. And the only way it ever gets to 30 million is if the Dolphins pay him 45 million in 2026, non-guaranteed 45 million. That number was put in there to ensure that, now, as Hill's camp would tell it, they're forced to redo the deal with 1 year left. Just do a contract that expires after 2025. That forces them to do the deal before 26, make it a reasonable number in 25, and then it's either franchise tag or free agency after that. So the Dolphins, with that big number that forced the new money average from 25 to 30, they are forced to deal with it. And as I previously suggested, I think what happens here, or at least what the Dolphins are inclined to do, we'll see if they change their inclination. I think they're inclined to move money around. 19.8 is what he's due to make this year. You got the 45 in 2026. There's a way to take some of that money from 26 and move it to 24. Now, they could tack a phony year or two on the back end after that if they want to try to drive up the new money average. I don't know that they're willing to do that, and I don't know how necessary that is. If you couch it in terms of cash flow, if there's a way to make his cash flow this year and next year match the top receivers in the game, that's all that matters. Then you just change the analysis. You shift the definition of what the contract is. It's no longer about new money. It's about cash flow. That's what happened with Patrick Mahomes last year. His new money average continues to be a pathetically low 45 million. But after Joe Burrow got to 55 and had cash flow in the range of 52 per year for 23 through 26, Mahomes had his money reshuffled. So his cash flow was equivalent to roughly, almost, I think just about the same as Joe Burrow. That's one way to do it with Tyreek Hill. But the bottom line is he's expecting something. And if he doesn't get something, what will he do about it? It would be a sharp turn. I think he's sensitive to the perception that he has traditionally been kind of a pain in the ass. And that's one of the reasons why the Chiefs were fine to trade him. Oh, and they've won every Super Bowl that's been played since they traded him, which kind of vindicates the decision to move on from Tyreek Hill. They win the Super Bowl in 2019 with him. They don't win it in 2020 or 21 with him. They've won every Super Bowl played since they moved on from him. And I don't think he wants to acquire that label of guy who gets passed around from team to team because he wants too much. He wants what he believes is fair. And at this point, when you consider the dynamics of the market, you could argue it's not fair. The real question for the Dolphins is, do they want to hold firm with the Tyreek Hill deal? And is the Jalen Waddle contract at $28.25 million in new money more than Hill? That's probably why Hill's saying 30. No, Hill's behind Jalen Waddle. Are the Dolphins transitioning from Hill as number one to Waddle as number one. Only the Dolphins know that, but they've got to figure this out. Between Hill and Tua Tagovailoa, they got a couple of guys at a time when they don't have a whole lot of cap space laying around or lying around. I never really know. Do you have that same problem, lying or laying? And I always get it wrong. Whenever I look it up, it's like, yeah, I should have used the other one. Anyway, if they had extra cap space around, when in doubt, just leave it out. If they've got that money, the hell, they would have maybe had Christian Wilkins still on the team. Or worst case scenario, they could have franchise tagged him and traded him. They didn't have the cap money to do that. So they've got an issue. They've got an issue. And of course, Dolphins fans get upset when we point it out because all fans of all teams would prefer everyone to say, this is great. You are great. And you might win the Super Bowl this year. There's nothing to be worried about at all. Don't fret about a thing. Your team is awesome. Okay. Something not awesome for Jon Gruden, the former Raiders coach. Quick summary of what happened with Jon Gruden. For those of you who haven't been paying attention for the last 3 years, it was during the 2021 season, several weeks in, someone took a small collection of emails from 650,000 documents that had been harvested as part of Beth Wilkinson investigation into the Commanders and Daniel Snyder. Somebody took a small sliver of those documents and first gave some to the Wall Street Journal. It created a ruckus when it all came to light, some inappropriate emails that Gruden had sent while he was working for ESPN to former Commanders executive Bruce Allen. Then, when that didn't do the job, when he weathered the initial storm and wasn't pushed out of his job as head coach of the Raiders on Monday, the first dump was Friday, the second dump was Monday to the New York Times. That did it. By Monday night, Jon Gruden had resigned under duress as head coach of the Raiders. So he turned around and sued the league and Commissioner Roger Goodell for weaponizing those emails. And look, as we've been saying for nearly 3 years now, there was a small universe of people who had access to those documents. Somebody selected those documents, gave them to the media. This wasn't a situation, and I know that reporters get upset when I say this because they want everyone to think that their work is some magical exploration of hidden compartments and dumpster diving and searching for shredded documents and piecing them together. Sometimes, a lot of the time, you're just in the right place at the right time at the right organization. Somebody wants something out there. What do? Let's give it to the Wall Street Journal. Let's give it to the New York Times. That gives it an extra layer of credibility. Ooh, these august publications making this report. It must be true. It must be accurate. There must be something done about this. So Gruden's argument was somebody knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted to take him out. So he sued over it. And you have to be able to compartmentalize what he did to deserve to be out of a job versus what someone else did to take advantage of the circumstances to do something that shouldn't have been done. And as I explained back when Gruden found out the Nevada Supreme Court wasn't going to allow him to stay in open court with this case, the timing really did undermine the integrity of the 2021 football season. Someone took out a head coach of one of the 32 NFL franchises during the season after games were played, with games still left to be played, in a year that the Raiders were good enough to get to the playoffs and almost beat the Bengals, who ended up beating the Chiefs to get to the Super Bowl that year. The integrity of the season was undermined, and that's something a lot more people should be concerned about than seem to be, in large part because, again, like the topic I'm going to talk about coming up, there aren't many voices in the media landscape calling it like it is. Someone at the league office or someone with one of the teams, and if there was a suspect A, it would be the Commanders, someone undermined the integrity of the 2021 football season. That just has been glossed over in all of this. So what happened was, as the NFL does whenever and wherever it can, when it gets sued, let's get the case to the secret rigged kangaroo court of arbitration. Secret and rigged are the two key terms there because they want to win, but they also don't want us, the media, the fans, the consumers, Congress, anyone, to know what's going on behind the curtain. So the initial ruling at the trial court level in the Gruden case was he gets to stay in court. The Nevada Supreme Court, on a 2-1 vote, just a segment of the total members of the court, the 3 that were assigned to handle the case, 2-1 found Gruden's got to go to arbitration. And it's not even something that comes from his contract. There's a clause in the NFL's constitution and bylaws that I don't think should apply to what Jon Gruden was trying to do. It's a clause that gives the commissioner the exclusive ability to arbitrate and resolve any disputes involving conduct detrimental to the game. Well, the conduct detrimental to the game allegedly was conducted by the commissioner. Think of how preposterous that is on the surface. And as I've said before, most major companies want to take cases out of the hands of a jury and put them in arbitration. Instead of 6 people who aren't lawyers, who might just decide, and this came to light possibly last week in the Sunday Ticket case, we don't like what the defendant did. We don't quite know how to get through the maze from this feeling that we don't like what they did to here's liability. So we'll just blast down walls and blow open doors and just draw a straight line from entrance to exit because all we know is we don't like what they did. If you arbitrate the case, it's going to be a lawyer, it's going to be a retired judge, it's going to be somebody who will feel constrained by the barriers in the maze. And if you can't get from point A to point B, sorry, you lose. Even if objectively the thing the defendant did is unsavory. That's why big companies love to go to arbitration. Juries are far more likely to make their decisions based upon the fact that they just don't like the defendant. So the NFL takes it one step farther. Instead of using some third party to arbitrate these cases, third party with no connection to the NFL, no reliance upon the NFL for future arbitration cases. Somebody, the 2 sides agree, we're going to use the American Arbitration Association or this place or that place, something completely independent. Instead of that, the NFL says, oh, no. We're going to decide. The commissioner or his designee will arbitrate the case. It is ludicrous. I still can't believe that they get away with it. It's wrong. They shouldn't want to do it. You shouldn't want to be put in a situation where you have to pass judgment on the owners who hire you and pay you. You shouldn't want to pass judgment on, as I've said before, just imagine if in every marriage, part of the prenup was any disputes will be resolved by me. I mean, life would be a little easier. Well, maybe. You'd win the disputes. I don't know that you'd win the war, but it's overreached by the NFL. But regardless, the Nevada Supreme Court found that, yeah, Gruden has to take the case to arbitration. And the news yesterday was that when Gruden filed a petition for rehearing in front of the entire Nevada Supreme Court, they said no. Which basically means he's shit out of luck at this point, because his only path is to file a petition for writ of certiorari. That's a term that we used last week as it relates to the Sunday Ticket case. Writ of certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court. First, they'd have to take up the case. 4 justices would have to agree to take up the case, and then at least 5 would have to agree to overturn the ruling and find that the NFL's secret rigged kangaroo court arbitration process is untenable and Gruden isn't bound by it and Gruden should be able to go to court. And I can tell you right now, and I'm going to delve into this more a little bit later, there's no way he's going to win on that. There's no way. And I didn't write this last night when I posted the item about yesterday's developments, but Gruden kind of gets what he deserves here, not because of the emails. See, it is very difficult, I think, to separate his conduct from the conduct that was visited upon him. 2 wrongs don't make a right, though. I heard that somewhere. Gruden, what he did was wrong. The way the NFL went about doing it, or whoever leaked those emails to the Wall Street Journal and then the New York Times, was wrong. There should be a sanction for both. The bottom line is Gruden's effort to pursue justice will happen within the confines of the NFL's in-house secret rigged kangaroo court. Now, he gets what he deserved, not because of the emails he sent, but because, and this is a political observation, not a political opinion, but I've heard enough over the years to know that Jon Gruden is to the right of the political spectrum. Well, as was explained recently, and this is, talk to any lawyer you know who's involved in litigation involving individuals and companies, or really any litigation against companies. If you're either pursuing the company or you're defending the company, if they tell you the truth, they will say especially in the federal court system, but it's true in the states as well. And this is unique to the federal system, it's where the president appoints the judges at every level for every vacancy. When it's a Republican president, the judges more likely to be appointed will be of a mindset that will be favorable to business. When it's a Democratic president, the judges who are appointed at every level, district court, appeals court, Supreme Court, they will be more likely to have a mindset that is favorable to the interests of individuals. And if you haven't been paying attention to the Supreme Court, it's safe to say 6-3 would be the outcome if the court even took up the case, and I doubt that they will. But if they would take it up, Jon Gruden would find out that the political ideologies that he has subscribed to have caused him to lose 6-3. And, you know, this is one of the realities. It's not a political opinion, it's a political fact that individuals who buy into a certain ideology are also signing their own ticket for a one-way exit from the courthouse if and when they're ever trying to get justice from a major company. That's a fact. And that fact is going to result in Jon Gruden not getting what he's looking for at the Supreme Court if he even tries. And I would guess if we looked at the background, the makeup, the history, the rulings, the political affiliations of the judges of the Nevada Supreme Court, that's probably why his case wasn't taken up for rehearing. And it's probably why he was 2-1 on the losing side. You take away one of the judges and you replace that judge with someone who might be more favorable to the interests of individuals, could have been 2-1 the other way, and the case would still be alive. Or the NFL would have been the one to seek rehearing. The NFL would be the one trying to get to the Supreme Court. And frankly, the NFL might have been able to get to the Supreme Court and win 6-3 on the question of whether or not the case would have to go to arbitration, which leads to the last point I want to make today. The Sunday ticket case. We've now had several days to digest it. And of course, the NFL is hoping it all dies down and we quit talking about it, at least until they get a chance to go back to court on July 31 and try to convince the presiding judge, Philip Gutierrez, to throw out a $14 billion outcome. It's amazing to me, too, how many media outlets don't realize the $4.7 billion verdict, technically 4.696, gets tripled. The coverage of this has been embarrassing to the profession. And maybe it's indicative of, number one, journalists aren't lawyers. And number two, I really do think there's a lot of kowtowing to the NFL that goes on. I haven't gotten in trouble yet for being as blunt and candid as I've been about the Sunday ticket case. Maybe this is the straw that'll break the camel's back. I don't know. But boy, I feel like a lot of people are running scared when it comes to calling this Sunday ticket verdict what it is. So one of the obvious failures is we're not multiplying 4.696 by 3, and the headline should be 14.088 billion that's on the line. The other issue here, the NFL really does have ace in the hole, or ace up the sleeve, or wherever the ace goes that is good for the NFL. You look at what the Supreme Court did yesterday in the presidential immunity case. The Supreme Court, and again, this is not a political opinion, it is a political fact. The Supreme Court is more political than ever. You can predict the outcomes of the rulings by just taking a head count of the justices appointed by Republican presidents and the justices appointed by Democratic presidents. 6-3. Get used to hearing that number, 6-3. It used to be, it was 4-4 with a swing. When Kennedy was on, he was the swing. He was a Republican that went a little rogue. They're always concerned, the presidents are, that the person they put on the bench might go rogue. There's been an effort, I think, in recent years on both sides to make sure that you're getting somebody that you can trust when the time comes to do what needs to be done, even if it means disregarding years of precedent, which we saw a couple summers ago. And I think what's happening now, and it's always been there, but I think it is more stark than ever before. The 6 that want to find a certain way out of that maze I was talking about earlier, they'll find a way to the other side of the maze, even if they have to ignore precedent. Precedent is supposed to be sacred. You're bound by the past rulings of the Supreme Court. They become law of the land, unchangeable under any set of circumstances. Well, you can always say this case is a little bit different, and here's why. So the outcome is going to be different. And that's the reality going forward. You know, there's so much hand-wringing on the Democratic side about what this means for the powers of a president, and basically we're electing a king. I guarantee you this: if and when there's a prosecution of a Democratic president that ends up at the Supreme Court under the current Constitution, they'll carve out some exceptions to yesterday's ruling. And then if there's a Republican president under the current Constitution that ends up being prosecuted, they'll push it back the other way. It's all driven by the desired result. So for as long as it's 6-3, and it may be decades until it's at least 5-4 the other way, if it's a Republican president, the powers are broad. If it's a Democratic president, they're going to find ways to reel it in. And that applies to everything. Abortion rulings, as long as it's under the current Constitution, it's going to be favorable to pro-life interests, and it's going to be adverse to pro-choice interests for the things that actually make it to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I say all that because, and I know this is a big financial risk the NFL is taking with $14 billion on the line, but what choice do they have? All they have left is the court system. So, Judge Gutierrez, please throw out the $14 billion verdict. It's going to be hard for him to do. Would have been easier for him to do before the $14 billion got attached to this, or 4.696 if you're only paying attention to what most of the media is saying. But I think there's reason for the NFL to be confident by the time they get to the U.S. Supreme Court, if the current configuration holds, and we're only talking about 3-4 years maximum, if and when that happens, the final ruling will be that $14.088 billion plus interest, which will become significant, attorney's fees, which will not be cheap for a 9-year litigation that continues forward. It could all go away like that. And if I were going to put a bet, if DraftKings or FanDuel's taking action on what ultimately happens here, I would bet on the NFL ultimately avoiding the $14.088 billion. The Supreme Court finding a way to say that the antitrust exemption under the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961 applies to this, or finding that because the NFL wasn't the one directly selling Sunday Ticket to the end user, the antitrust laws don't apply. A lot of the arguments that have been made by the NFL and preserved by the NFL, they will find a sympathetic ear at the U.S. Supreme Court. And not just because Clarence Thomas got a Super Bowl ring from Jerry Jones 30 years ago, but that doesn't hurt. The Supreme Court has been and will be pro-business, and the pro-business ruling here is limiting antitrust liability, giving the NFL a $14 billion gratuity, and moving on. So get ready. Now, look, and this gets back to, this is the last point on, then I'm going to answer some questions. The biggest reason I've been disappointed by the way that my brethren in the media have been covering this case, even if the NFL ultimately doesn't have to pay a penny to the plaintiffs and can continue to do business the way it has, the mere fact that there was a trial in open court and documents came to light that reveal what the NFL has been doing to consumers, and this is the point where I may end up getting fired. The NFL's been screwing all of us for 30 years. That's the, I think, real headline of the Sunday Ticket trial. They decided 30 years ago, when they came up with the Sunday Ticket package, to make sure that they found a price that would be high enough to get a certain percentage of consumers to say, boy, you know what? I'd really like to be able to watch whatever game I'd like to watch instead of the games that are available to me on my local CBS or Fox affiliate. But boy, I just can't afford that. I just can't, I got to go get the Sunday Ticket. I got to get the DirecTV. I got to put the satellite dish in. I got to pay all that money. I just really am not in a position to do that. I'd love to do it, but I just can't. That's one set of victims that isn't even represented by this case. The people who never got Sunday Ticket because they weren't going to pay the exorbitant price are technically victims. They could have been enjoying Sunday Ticket for the last 30 years. The victims are, in that window from 2011 to early 2023, the people who paid the exorbitant price, who wanted it badly enough. And they market it. Saints fan in Pittsburgh, want to watch the Saints games. How do I do it? Get Sunday Ticket. Good, I'll get the Saints games. Oh shit, I got to get all of them. Oh well, I love the Saints enough that I'll pay for all of them, even though I don't care about the others. How much does it cost? Oh man, that's going to hurt, but I love the Saints. That's how they've always marketed the damn thing. So the PR fallout, if there really was any, and there really hasn't been, should be, hey fans, here's what they really think of you. They're manipulating you like pawns on a chessboard. They're doing what they have to do to maintain what they're getting from CBS and Fox by driving the price up so high that you really have to pay through the nose when you shouldn't have to get it, or you just watch whatever's on CBS and Fox. I'll tell you a story back from the early 90s, early to mid 90s, before I got Sunday Ticket. I remember where I was when I became aware of Sunday Ticket. My wife and I had just gotten married. Our 30th anniversary is coming up, August 26th. We were looking for furniture, as newly married couples tend to do. And as we were browsing, I saw one of those cardboard cutout displays with this thing called Sunday Ticket. And I started reading it, and I got very excited. Because here I am, 1994, 30 years ago, rabid NFL fan of the Vikings, which I stupidly picked as my team instead of the Steelers, even though I grew up in Steeler country in the early 70s. And even though it was the Immaculate Reception that drew me to football in the first place, for some reason, if you haven't noticed, I've got a little contrarian streak. I decided I wasn't going to be a fan of the Steelers. I like that purple helmet with the two things on the side that I really didn't know what they were at first. Didn't realize they were horns. I just thought it looked cool. The purple looked cool. Frank Tarkin and Chuck Foreman. Anyway, fast forward 20 years, I can watch all their games. Wow. But you know what? We were renting a house at the time. The whole idea of getting the satellite dish, it was expensive. We were watching our money, saving for a house. I can't remember what it cost at the time, but it was enough to get me to say, that's for down the road a little bit. And it was ultimately 3 years down the road. So for 94, 95, and 96, I remember going to the store, and I love going to the grocery store. I've said that before, because you go and you have a list of things, you get them, you bring them home, you put them away, and you feel like you have completed something, unless you forgot to get something on your list, which I tend to do. But it's still, there's something finite and rewarding about you leave your house with nothing, you go, you push the cart around, you get all the stuff you want, you bring it home, you put it away, mission accomplished. Anyway, I remember standing in line, pulling off the TV guide. It was about yay big by yay big, and it was bound flat. It wasn't like a normal magazine that was stapled in the middle page and flopped open. It had a thick binding to it. And I'd go, and I probably should have bought the thing, but you know, I was saving for a house. And I'd look to see on the local affiliates coming up on Sunday, is there a chance that the Vikings game is going to be on? And there were certain weeks where, ooh, maybe there's a chance. Steelers play at 4. They're on the West Coast. Maybe the 1 o'clock game on, and I guess at the time it was NBC and Fox, 94, 95, 96. It was NBC and Fox. Maybe they'll have the Viking game. Maybe Fox will have the Viking game today because the Steeler game isn't on until 4 on NBC because they're playing as the road team at San Francisco, whatever the case may be. And I remember having that feeling, that little, ooh, and the little dopamine rush if I'd see Vikings at Giants, 1 o'clock Eastern on the local Fox affiliate. That's how it is. If you don't have DirecTV, you are stuck with whatever is on your local affiliate. It's not DirecTV, Sunday Ticket. Obviously, it's no longer on DirecTV. So my point is this. For 30 years, the NFL has priced that product so that even though you have the freedom of choice, it costs so much that most people will just choose to turn on their TV and watch whatever game is being provided in their local market. And that's one of the reasons the NFL is so adamant about, oh, we have free over the air in every market. Every team's games are free over the air in their local market. Yeah, but you got people in that market that don't want to watch that game. And that's the problem here. Even if they pay zero, we're all aware of what the scam has been for 30 years. And here's the reality. What's anybody going to do about it? I mean, I've canceled Sunday Ticket. Number one, I don't really need it. And I haven't needed it since I've been going to NBC every weekend for the past 15 years. But, you know, we'll see if they offer it to me cheaper now that I've decided not to pay $3.89 for Sunday Ticket in Red Zone. And I did like to have it here in the event my son is down there. Other family members come over to watch the games, kind of open the barn if I'm not here and let folks enjoy the games. Why deprive them of that? It's a fun place to hang out and watch games. And yeah, it'd be nice to be here, but it's also very nice to be at NBC because it doesn't pay to be here. It does pay to be at NBC, but we'll see how it goes and we'll see what they do. We'll see if they change their ways, not because of this verdict, but because the game has been exposed. But the problem is, who's really exposing the game? Who's really talking about it other than me right here? Are the other media outlets telling consumers what the practical impact of the last 30 years has been? No. So I wish they would, just because, number one, two reasons. One, more consumers will be aware of what's gone on. And two, I won't be the only one they can blame. I will have some company if the NFL decides to be upset about the fact that we dare to point out the truth of Sunday Ticket for the past 30 years. Okay, question time. Best moments in your 15-year relationship with NBC. That comes from our good friend, PFT PM Posse. Yesterday was the 15-year anniversary of the moment the switch flipped from PFT as an independent operation to housed on the NBA system. I think the best moment for me, there are several. I mean, realizing that they were going to put me on TV and actually allow me to continue to be on TV after my first shot at TV, that was rewarding because it just changed everything that we do. It expanded things. It changed my life, good ways and bad ways. Not being home on weekends during football season, I kind of like to be here, but hey, it's, you know, it's worth it to go be part of NBC's Football Night in America. But I think the most rewarding was when we did our most recent contract because, you know, you never quite know if the NFL is ever going to successfully get the message through to its broadcast partner. We probably had enough of this guy. Maybe you should think about not keeping this guy around. So the last deal we did, which was one that I was very happy with financially, and that secured our relationship through June of 27. It's kind of the point where, and that'll be 3 years from now. It'll be 18 years with NBC. I'd like it to continue after that, but if it doesn't, I already got my money. I don't need to keep doing what I'm doing at that level. PFT can go back to being independent. I can do whatever advertising deals I need to do. I'll have the money to keep the doors open while we go back to being independent. But if that's what happens, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. So that was the moment where you always want to get to the point where, and it's a profane term that I usually use to describe this amount of money. And I don't want to make Kristen bleep it out. It's FU money. Once I signed that deal, I knew that by the time it was done, I did the math. I was probably already there, but this kind of cemented it. Like, this would be 18 years, unless they fire me first, but there's still a contract they'd have to deal with. 18 years, and if it doesn't continue, I'll still be able to keep going as an independent media outlet, which frankly, and this is probably the best argument to the NFL to not try to silence me. Imagine how worse I'd be if I wasn't connected to a broadcast partner. So those days could be coming in only 3 years, and who knows, maybe I'll choose 3 years from now to take that path. All right. Another very important question from PFT PM Posse. What's the best thing you've grilled lately? Most fun thing you've done during hiatus? I've discovered the chicken cutlet, Tommy cutlets. Hey, I used to buy the big chicken breasts that are like an inch thick and they take forever to cook and it's hard to get them to the right level of moisture. And then you get the chicken tenders, which cook very fast. The grilling experience of the chicken tenders is not all that great because by the time you put them on, they're basically done. The cutlet is awesome. I made them last night. The cutlet is awesome. My wife found some seasoning that's kind of a buttery seasoning that you sprinkle on and you flip it over 3 minutes. And I put a little bit of butter. My wife likes this Irish butter that I don't really like it like on toast or anything, but you put it on top of a steak for that last minute or so, on top of a grilled chicken cutlet the last minute or so. It is awesome. And I got a couple left upstairs, and I'm probably going to go have one for lunch as soon as we wrap this up. Most fun thing I've done during the hiatus. Haven't really done any fun things yet. What happens during hiatus is that's when I spend time paying attention to the things I don't have time to pay attention to during the regular grind. So it's medical appointments, it's annual physical, it's other issues that need to be addressed. It's things that I probably won't get to, that I want to get to, that I'll kick to next year during hiatus. I spend a lot of time on the fiction project. Son of Mine is done and sent to the printer. That's due to come out September 3rd. I've got another one that I'm working on that I want to get done before the end of hiatus. I'm about 35,000 words in. And the process for me, I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but the process goes like this. I just sit down and see where the spirit moves me. And then after about 30 to 40,000 words, I look at where I've been and I figure out where it's going and I make it all work. And I think it works usually. It's up to the reader as to whether it does. So I've got one going on now that I'd like to get done at least by the time football season starts so I can focus on football, and I'll probably dust off a couple of the ones that have been sitting around and try to clean those up. The creative process is more demanding of just, your thoughts and your time when you're actually in the drafting, but I have a little more time than usual. During football season, I can find an hour or two, 3 or 4 days a week where I can really sit down and crank. And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to do to keep busy during this hiatus, which is already 2 weeks in, and we've got 6 weeks left, and then we'll be back on PFT Live every day. CJ Newman, are you going to give away any codes this year for Madden? I don't get Madden codes anymore. You know what happened? And I'll be candid about it. Remember when they had the song on the soundtrack and they bleeped out Colin Kaepernick's name? Remember that? I dared to write about that. And coincidentally or not, I don't get free codes anymore. So anyway, I play Madden every day. I'd be a great ambassador for Madden if they just chose to lean into it. I get on a bike, I ride it for an hour, and I play Madden Ultimate Team every day. I could be a great salesperson for Madden, a great ambassador for Madden if they chose to take advantage of it, but they haven't, and that's fine. I'm still going to keep playing it. I've tried other games, and I'll try other games, and I'll end up wasting my 50 or 60 bucks because it's like, oh yeah, this game sucks. I'm going to go back and play Madden every day. Ultimate Team every day that I'm home. An hour on the bike and an hour of playing Madden, but no free codes, presumably because apparently somebody got their nose out of joint when I decided to tell the truth. That's their problem, not mine. Okay. Man, these are some random questions. CJ Newman. Did you use AI to come up with these questions? Did you put in most random football questions I can ask? What's the most amount of yards you've seen picked up on quarterback sneak? I really don't. 5? I don't know. Another one from CJ Newman. What's the kickoff going to look like in Madden this year? I imagine there won't be many plays for it available. Look, the kickoff is going to look like it looks in the NFL. That's going to be our first shot at experimenting with it. What do? Got to hit the landing zone from the goal line to the 20. If you're short, it goes to the 40. If you're out of bounds, it goes to the 40. If you kick it out of the end zone, it goes to the 30. Of course, in the early stages of the Ultimate Team, good luck kicking it to the opposing team's 10 with the kickers they give you. But yeah, we'll find out how it looks. And it's going to be hard for EA to approximate what it's going to look like in the NFL because all they have to go on is what the XFL did. So it's going to be, I think, the most fascinating aspect of the new Madden. How are these kicks going to go? And is the algorithm going to allow, basically, you put a great returner back there, he gets through one hole, and he's loose. And there's only a kicker to beat. Are we going to have a lot more? We should. If there's going to be more kickoffs that are live, there should be a lot more long returns in the new version of Madden. All right. CJ Newman's got more questions, but I'm going to move on to someone else. K. Tranada is elite. How can all the NFL teams afford roughly $500 million each for the Sunday ticket lawsuit, but not have the money to redo their own stadiums themselves? Oh, they've got the money to redo the stadiums themselves. If they had to pay for their own stadiums, they would. But why do it if you can leverage the local government to give you free money? And you make all these arguments, we did this study about the economic impact, or hey, maybe we'll move. We can't be the politicians responsible for the sports team moving, so let's give them all the money, even if the electorate would never approve of this. If it was ever on a ballot, they'd say no. Just look at what happened in Jackson County, Missouri. But we'll do it. Come to us. I mean, Missouri is going to try to find a way to go around the will of the people and let the elected officials put the money together to keep the Chiefs from going to Kansas City, or from going to Kansas City, Kansas, possibly, but going to Kansas and leaving Missouri. So, yeah, it's apples and oranges. And again, there's no guarantee they're going to have to come up with that money. At least, and this is, I think, one of the reasons why they're going to push the appeals as far as they can. It gives them ample time to come up with a strategy for getting together $14.088 billion, because, as I pointed out over the weekend, some of the owners might not be able to write a check for $440 million if it ever comes down to it. Here's a good question from William Reynolds. Whatever happened with the last two lawsuits Deshaun Watson was dealing with? Did they get settled or just go away? They were supposed to go to trial at some point. I got to poke around a little and see. I'll send a couple of emails and see what's going on with those Deshaun Watson cases. Maybe they were quietly settled and nobody ever asked and nobody ever told, and off we go with Watson entering year 3 of his 5-year fully guaranteed contract with the Browns. All right, scrolling through here to get a few more of these before we wrap this up. Matt Bostic, given the influence of NIL in college, will the NFL have to liaise with the NCAA regarding potentially capping college salaries in order for NFL teams to remain salary cap compliant when players come into the league and avoid players getting less pay when they are first drafted? Look, I'm not sure I understand the question, but unless and until there is a nationwide union that represents all players for all NCAA institutions, anything that college football tries to put in place by way of a salary cap, limits, or whatever is going to be an antitrust violation. That's why we got to this point. After years of having massive antitrust violations hiding in plain sight, because all of these colleges are independent businesses. When they come together under the umbrella of the NCAA, and the NCAA says, these are the rules. You can only give them tuition, fees, room, board, and snacks. And that's all you can give them. And you can give them nothing more. That's an antitrust violation because they're coming together and they're fixing the wages. Anything that fixes the wages, unless there's 2 ways out of this. One, Congress gives them an exemption to the antitrust laws. 2, they create a multi-employer bargaining unit that unionizes all NCAA football employees, and they create a CBA like the one in the NFL, which has salary cap, minimum salary, maximum salary, trade terms, draft, free agency, whatever it may be. They can come up with all the things that if the NFL didn't have, the NFLPA would be antitrust violations. So the NFL, I think, would be very wise to just leave it alone and not potentially commit antitrust violations by getting involved with what the NCAA is doing with its players/employees. James M., also known as Dr. J144, are quarterbacks underpaid or are star NBA players overpaid? Jason Tatum, making more than basically every quarterback with his new contract. NFL gets way more eyeballs than the NBA, but there are 53 guys on an NFL team and many fewer players on an NBA team. Is that why? This comes up every year when we get into NBA free agency. And here's Jason Tatum with 64 or 65 million per year, fully guaranteed on a 5-year deal. Fully guaranteed, 65 million a year. 10 million more than the highest paid new money NFL player. And I think Tatum's is not just new money. It's $65 million at signing, I think. I look at him and I look at Patrick Mahomes. And I've said in this spot recently that Mahomes should be making $100 million a year. His value to the sport is $100 million a year, to the entire sport. Look at Mahomes and look at Jason Tatum. In what world is Jason Tatum, who I think a lot of casual fans probably don't even know who that is? I don't pay much attention to the NBA. When it was time for the finals, I didn't know who Jason Tatum was. Now, again, I'm as casual an NBA fan as you can find, but I would say even the most casual NFL fan knows who Patrick Mahomes is and has seen Patrick Mahomes do what he does. 200 million watched some of the most recent Super Bowl. The average audience, I think, was like 120 or something like that. People know who Patrick Mahomes is. Patrick Mahomes is the ultimate ambassador of the National Football League. He should be getting paid a lot more. The best players in the NFL, the most visible players, most important players, I know this will never happen. There should be a separate fund that rewards the faces of the game. If you are one of that handful of players that is the straw that stirs the NFL's drink, you should be getting paid by a separate fund. Mahomes should be getting $100 million a year. Justin Jefferson should be getting more. The best of the best, the most visible, viable players. Good luck coming up with a reliable system for deciding who that should be. There'll always be an argument about it beyond Patrick Mahomes. So, yes, NBA teams are smaller. They play a lot more games. The NFL still generates more revenue. We see this argument every year. Guaranteed contracts and NFL players should be making more. So, look, when they come and ask for 18 games, this is your chance. NFLPA. Hey, why don't you respond by saying, we know you guys want to go to 20 anyway. Let's just go to 20 now. Here's our proposal. We'll go to 20. And this is what we want. We want 75% of the revenue, not 50%. We want to come up with a situation where the players collectively hold equity in the league. That there's a way that the NFL reconstructs so there is basically a 33rd franchise that is owned by the NFLPA. Come up with something like that. Go all in, but get more. Find a way to get more. The players are doing the best that they can when you consider if push comes to shove, the owners will shut the sport down and live off the money they already have, and the players won't. Maybe that imbalance is the reason why NFL players aren't getting more. But if you want more, play more games. They want to go to 20. Let's just get nuts. You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Let's go to 20. And let's make a lot more money on the way. That would be one way to balance out where things stand between NBA free agency and what NFL quarterbacks make. Matt Kavner, if the judgment against the NFL is upheld in the Sunday ticket case, could it have an effect on the salary cap for that season when the payment is due? No. Just so we're clear, no. It won't affect the salary cap for the money going out. The only way it potentially affects the cap is if the NFL has to change the model to the point where it would cause revenues to decrease. The revenues are what drive the salary cap. But, I mean, come on. Whatever the NFL does here, do you really think they're going to be making less money? Even if they have to sell Sunday ticket in a way that doesn't maximize the fee and potentially reduces the value of the CBS and Fox Sunday afternoon packages, do you really think they're going to make less money? Do you really think that? No, it'll be fine. They'll be fine. All right, I should wrap this up because it's been almost an hour. Some of these questions I see, it's good. You're popping up the questions again and again. I'll get to them eventually. Let me just see if there's one more we want to finish with. I keep hitting the wrong button and screwing up the texts, not the text, but the tweets. Let's see. Come on, give me one more here. Give me one more. How do we fix the U.S. men's soccer team? I really have no opinions about U.S. men's soccer other than this. The World Cup is coming. Don't you get an automatic berth in the World Cup if you host it? That may be the only way the U.S. men's team gets in. And I am very fascinated by this Copa America and the reaction to the grass, either the grass that is already there, like in Miami and Las Vegas, or the grass that is temporary in Dallas and Atlanta. There's like 14 total NFL venues that are being used for Copa America. This is a good dry run for what's coming in 2 years when a bunch of NFL stadiums are going to have the World Cup. Will the World Cup grass, as provided by the United States in these stadiums, especially the artificial turf stadiums, will it hold up to FIFA and soccer fan scrutiny? And will it embolden the NFL Players Association to say, we want grass in every stadium? Hey, back to what I was talking about earlier. You want 18? Let's go to 20 and let's have grass in every stadium. Let's go to 20 and let's have a higher piece of the pie. Let's go to 20 and let's have more players on the roster and more players in uniform. You know you're going to squeeze us to 20 eventually. Let's just go ahead and do it now. What they could get if they would just do that. Probably won't happen, so we won't find out. All right, we'll find out what's going on in the NFL tomorrow with another edition of PFT PM. Until then, check us out around the clock at profootballtalk.com. As always, thank you so much for your time, and we will talk to you again soon. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.